Gentlemen, welcome to Making Good Trouble at Medtronic. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Just so all of you know, if you are here as an attendee, your line has been muted once we entered the webinar. Also, please make sure to use the Q&A function for all questions you may have. Additionally, a follow-up email will be sent out with any information that you have today here on the webinar. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Arthur Edge.
Hi, greetings everybody, and welcome. I'm Arthur Edge, Director of the Healthcare Innovation Special Interest Group, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you to our program this evening. If we step forward to the next slide, I want to share a little bit about the Healthcare Innovation Special Interest Group and the care strategy where many of our programs are aligned to, including the one today. And you can see a nice infographic of that on the next slide, where what we do in HISIG is connect individuals across industry, academia, and government to do one of three things after they build a strong network. The first thing you can do is advance. That's deploying technologies through project-based experiences, whether at the research, development, or commercialization stage. You can participate in some of our programs focused on recruiting and retaining individuals. We have a variety of workforce development opportunities. And last but not least is focused on outreach, where you can help to educate the Black community and expose them to careers and innovations that attack disparities impacting that community. Again, the program this evening, Making Good Trouble at Medtronic, aligns to all of those areas. And I'll pass the program now to Medtronic. You'll get to hear from a number of individuals who have a long-standing history with NSBE and who are also thought leaders within Medtronic.
Hi, I'm Jeff Martha, CEO of Medtronic, the world's largest medical technology company. And I'm pleased to welcome you to this special event so that you can learn more about Medtronic and our mission, which is to use biomedical technology to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life for patients around the world. I want to kick things off by talking about my passion and personal commitment to inclusion and diversity. I firmly believe that diverse thinking makes for better business. Medtronic has 15 different employee resource groups, and they have been key to tackling the representation gap, instituting change where needed, and building a strong community of support. I had the honor of being the executive sponsor for the African Descent Network, or ADN, for the 5 years before becoming CEO. The most rewarding part of my tenure at Medtronic has been my involvement and work within our ADN community. ADN's key focus areas are recruit, engage, and develop, which means we are focused on recruiting great ADN talent, as well as helping to advance their careers while they're at Medtronic. Our focus on inclusion and diversity isn't new. It began with our mission, which was written nearly 60 years ago, and is the root of our culture. The Medtronic mission gives employees a shared sense of purpose. It inspires us, defines us, and provides a consistent set of guiding principles for how we operate as a company. Today, Medtronic employs more than 90,000 people worldwide, serving physicians and patients in more than 150 countries. I truly believe that we are a stronger, better company by bringing diversity of thought to our work and employing a workforce that represents our patients and our customers. Last year alone, we positively impacted more than 75 million patients around the world. That's more than 2 patients every second. The efforts of ADN and the other employee resource groups are helping us move the needle when it comes to inclusion and diversity. Thank you for taking the time to engage with Medtronic. We are always seeking the best and brightest talent to join us and help us alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life for millions of patients around the world. Hi, I'm
Hi, everyone. My name is Tashima Taylor. I will be your moderator for today. First, I would like to thank you all for attending tonight's virtual event. I hope the session is informative and solidifies your decision to pursue a career with Medtronic. The theme for tonight's event is Making Good Trouble at Medtronic. This theme was first introduced to Medtronic by our African Descent Network in celebration of Black History Month, as well as to pay homage to the late civil rights activist John Lewis. In addition, we're hoping with this theme that we can encourage everyone at Medtronic that if they see something that's not right or not fair, that they do something about it, even if it means creating a little good trouble. With that said, we have lots of information to share with you tonight. But first, before we begin, let's go into the agenda. We just finished our welcome from the HISIG leadership as well as our CEO. Up next, I will introduce tonight's speakers and provide you with some more information about Medtronic. Then we will go into our panel discussion in which our presenters will share with you what it means to them to make good trouble at Medtronic, as well as their employee experience. After the panel, I'll transition to talent acquisition, in which they will share some of the opportunities we currently have available and next steps to obtain those opportunities. And finally, we'll close with a Q&A in which we will answer the questions that you all have entered into the chat box. So remember, if you have any questions for us, please enter them into the Q&A box. Before we dive deeper into the program, let's meet tonight's speakers and panelists. I'll start with myself. As I shared with you before, my name is Tashima Taylor. I'm an engineering program manager at Medtronic, and I'm responsible for manufacturing transfers between the neurovascular and the cardiovascular operational units. I've been with Medtronic for a little over 2.5 years now, and in the medical device and pharmaceutical industry for over 10. In addition to my career, I'm also a lifetime NSBE member. I've held various roles within NSBE, from the collegiate level to the professional level, with my latest role being a founding board member for HISIG. Because of this, I'm extremely excited to be moderating this panel for you all today, as well as learning from our speakers what making good trouble means to them. With that said, I will now transition to Renee to introduce herself. Renee.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to both be here. I was excited to be invited. I think when first asked, I automatically said absolutely and yes, and then said, okay, no, what do you need me to do? So Renee Barber, I've been with Medtronic just about 5 years now. I'm the senior director of our US strategic accounts. So essentially, I run commercial operations and a strategic account management for our US region, which represents about $16 billion of the $30 billion that Medtronic runs globally. And, really, prior to coming there, I spent quite a bit of time, 11 years with GE Healthcare. And before that, I actually was in something very completely different, being in the automotive space for about 7 or 8 years. So a very different transition in a lot of different places between traditional industrial to supply chain to service, and now the last 5 years being in commercial. So very excited.
Thank you, Renee. Trent, please introduce yourself to the.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Trent Agnew, Senior Engineering Manager located just north of Denver here in Louisville, Colorado. Been with Medtronic for 7.5 years. And during that whole time, I've recruited heavily for NSBE. The team that I have essentially is tasked with baking reliability and quality into the product as we design it before it hits the market, right? And that team spans France, Israel, and domestic here in the US. And the products that we work on are quite interesting, I think. It's cranial robots for brain surgery, spine robots used in spine surgeries, and then implants and screws that are used during those surgeries, and the navigation system that helps guide the surgeon as she goes through her procedure in the OR. So I'm glad to be here tonight and looking forward to contributing to the discussion.
Thank you, Trent. Up next, we have Casey.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Casey Rayberg. I work in the Minneapolis area as a reliability and safety engineer within our cardiac group. I've been with the company now coming up on 4 years, and essentially, my day-to-day deals with supporting and developing various different quality metrics, projections, and analysis to support our design teams in ensuring that we have robust research and development programs coming out to pre-release into the market.
Thank you, Casey. And finally, we have Anita.
Thanks, Tashima. I have been at Medtronic for going on 3 years now, currently working at our location in Northridge, and I support all of the cross-functional roles in engineering, clinical, as well as technical and regulatory within the quality function at Medtronic.
Perfect. Thank you, Anita. So those are your panelists and speakers for tonight's event. Now that you have been introduced to our speakers, let's learn more about Medtronic. I will start off by what does Medtronic do? You may know us as the pacemaker or diabetes pump company, which is true, but we also do so much more. Medtronic has been around since the late 1940s, and many innovations later, we have evolved to become one of the largest healthcare technology solution companies in the world. Our mission drives everything we do. Written in 1960, our mission dictates that our first priority and foremost priority is to contribute to human welfare. Over half a century later, the mission continues to serve as our ethical framework and inspirational goal for our employees around the world. Our mission consists of 6 tenets. The first is to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. The second, to direct our growth in areas of biomedical engineering. The third, to strive without reserve for the greatest possible reliability and quality in our products. The fourth, to make a fair profit. The fifth, to recognize the personal worth of all employees. And the sixth, to maintain good citizenship. Driven by our mission, our rich history of innovation spans more than 60 years. This encourages us to continuously break barriers, some of which I will share on this slide. As I mentioned before, Medtronic was started in the late 1940s. In 1949, Medtronic was founded by our founder, Earl Bakken, who was an electrical engineering student at the time, and his brother-in-law, Palmer. Palmer was an entrepreneur, and together, the two created medical device electronic repair business. Then, in 1957, Medtronic created the first battery-operated external pacemaker. And in the remaining decades, we've expanded into heart valves, neural stimulation, spinal care, diabetes, remote monitoring, robotic-assisted spine surgery, and many more with our acquisition of Covidien in 2015. As you can see, our innovation pipeline has been robust since the very beginning, and we have more in store for the future. Today, we are the medical technology leader offering therapies and solutions that enable greater efficiencies, access, and value for healthcare systems, providers, and the people they serve. Our solutions are divided across our 4 operating units. Our first is our cardiovascular operating unit with 9 specialty areas. Our medical surgical specialty unit, our operating unit with 6 specialty areas. Then our neuroscience operating unit with 5 specialty areas. And finally, our diabetes care, which provides therapies for both type 1 and type 2 patients. So that's what we do. Now I'll share how we do it. It all starts with our strategy, which includes 3 key priorities. These priorities help us improve the continuum of care, specifically for chronic disease, all while developing new partnerships with those who are committed to transforming care. We focus on therapy innovation, providing a spectrum of offerings aimed at improving both economic and patient outcomes, globalization, adapting our thinking to address healthcare access challenges in both developed and developing countries, and economic value, thinking more holistically about the care continuum and how we can lead the creation of value-based care solutions. To help us deliver our strategy, we need to have the right people. We have more than 90,000 employees around the globe, including more than 10,000 scientists and engineers. To develop new innovations, we spent about $2.3 billion last year on research and development. That translated to more than 4,400 new patents and $465 million in clinical investment. We also have more than 350 clinical trials going on at any one time. All of this work is aimed at improving the lives of people around the world. We are truly a global company operating in more than 150 countries across 74 manufacturing facilities. Our therapies and global presence help 72 million people a year and support our mission to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. Now that you have learned more about what we do at Medtronic and how we do it, it's time for you to learn from our speakers how they make good trouble at Medtronic and what it's like to be a Medtronic employee. So we'll start with the first question. This question will start with Renee. What does it mean making good trouble? What does making good trouble mean to you? Renee?
Yes, and really it's three things. I think one, it's finding your voice and then using it where and when you can make a difference. And that can be big or small. It can be within your family. It can be your circle of friends. It could be at your university. It can be in your community. It's calling out what is considered acceptable digs. So whether it's racial comments, mansplaining. I have a nephew who's 14, and we had a long conversation around that we don't use the phrase thought to talk about a girl. It's also creating teachable moments and not just shaming and blaming. One of the things I feel like for John Lewis is he spent his life not necessarily just shaking his finger and calling people out, but he treated his life and his work as teachable moments, and he spent the time to make sure that he taught his colleagues how to do better and be better.
Thank you, Renee. And I like that you called out teachable moments, right? A lot of times when we think about making trouble, it's, raising our hand or maybe contesting the status quo, but we can also make good trouble by just taking the opportunity to educate those who may not have had the exposure or the experience. So thank you for sharing that. That's really, really informative and a nice way to make some good trouble. Up next is Trent. For you, Trent, what does making good trouble mean to you?
Thanks for the question, Tashima. And just to build on the paragraph that Renee started, I would say, to me, it means challenging. If you see something that's unjust or unfair or unbalanced or where there isn't equity, to voice your concern and change the situation, right? It's really to be disruptive, right, to the status quo. And that even translates, from an engineering discipline, right? Being disruptive to what's the normal condition that's been accepted is what we call innovation, right? So the whole concept of being disruptive, either in what you see from a cultural or philanthropic point of view or more technical point of view in engineering, making good trouble means pretty much just changing the world around you to make it better for future generations.
Thank you, Trent. I think that that's also a good perspective to add. I know the majority of the people on this call are engineers, and sometimes we may think that we're not in a place to actually use our technical competencies or expertise to make some good trouble. But there are opportunities, right? Like you said, if something is not fair, if we're dealing with, and for example, in our field, healthcare disparities, like we can use our technical knowledge to figure out ways to provide better solutions and better outcomes to patients. So that's a way as well to make good trouble. So thank you for sharing that. Up next is Casey. What does making good trouble mean to you?
Yeah, and I think, kind of building off of the previous responses, I think when we look at, especially where we are today and over the last couple of years, the discussions that everyone's been having, what we find a lot of times is we have to find ways to challenge the narratives that for many years either we've taken for granted or otherwise, we haven't found a way to really move the needle. And I think from my perspective, I think making good trouble really requires, I like to call it relentless advocacy. We all have some special ability, whether we're engineers, whether we are, trained in other disciplines, or whether we have no training at all. It's looking inward and recognizing the voice we have within ourselves. I think we'll talk about this more later. One of Medtronic's key tenets is you have a voice, and using that relentlessness and using that as an advocable moment to, whether it's leveraging others to see your perspective, driving that change yourself, or building a coalition. I think these are all different ways in which, no matter what your background may be, you can find a way to make good trouble.
Perfect. Thank you, Casey. And I like that you said that we all have a voice, right? That voice can be us, using it ourselves or reaching out to others and leveraging them to speak up on our behalf. But we all have the opportunity to utilize our voice to make some good trouble. And I'll also pass it to Anita. Anita, did you have anything else you wanted to add regarding making good trouble?
Yeah, I would echo to Casey's point, and I believe making good trouble is really standing up in the face of opposition, no matter how unpopular or uncomfortable it may be at times, and really just doing the right thing to really ensure a level playing field. I do that all day long in my job, and that's one of the pleasures that I really enjoy about my work. But more importantly, being in an organization like Medtronic that, provides the platform and that type of open environment where we can speak out, which is, unusual because there's quite a few companies out there that don't necessarily have that platform for us.
Thank you, Anita. I definitely appreciate that addition. We've been talking a lot just in the question of making good trouble about, utilizing your voice, leveling the playing field, making sure that if there's any sort of inequalities, that we are making sure that we are using our voice or our technical competencies, or we're standing up, making sure that things are fair, right? And if we don't see them as being fair, is to actually do something about it. And so with that, I believe that we also have to, take into consideration inclusion and belonging, right? When we talk about making sure that things are fair and things are equitable, we also have to look at that as well. So with that said, Renee, can you tell us about opportunities at Medtronic that help foster belonging?
Sure. And I'll answer the question. Then I'm going to weave in a little bit. I saw one of the Q&A questions that came up. And so hopefully I can answer and do a little bit of dual work here. So when I first thought about this, think about this question, you've seen, and we generally do show the whole employee resource groups and all the ERGs. And yes, those organizations are there to help you build your network, engage, lead, learn. And it goes to, I think one of the questions was around having, the challenge being a woman, an engineer, and working with men or working in a male dominated space. And I will say, when I first started out, the first companies I worked for, they didn't have that. So there wasn't a network group to go to. And I have been at places where you're either the only woman as a supervisor or production leader, or being somewhere where maybe you're the only African-American. I mean, I had been working maybe 8 years before I went to the company and found out that I was the first Black, salaried person they had hired. And so those companies didn't have these resource groups. And so I had to either try to find another leader that I felt close enough to have that conversation with, or candidly, I talked to my family. I'm from a pretty outspoken woman-dominated family. And so I had to go and work with them. But my dad worked with the unions. So I would go and I'd call him. And, we kind of have these candid heart-to-hearts. So it did help. So those employee resource groups, I wouldn't gloss over that, yeah, okay, everybody kind of shows they have these network groups, because not all companies do. I think the other thing is, so while Medtronic spends some time saying, how do you connect in the community where you work? And that's really through the resource groups. There is the philanthropic work that you can do, where they actually not only do matching funds to nonprofit organizations, they actually now have a group where you can get targeted grant and funding for local organizations that you volunteer and you work with. But they also spend a lot of time making sure that you have the ability to create belonging and connection in the communities where you live. So the fact that our African Descent Network, there are more than 18 hubs across the US, and we have the newest one that literally just started. We just kicked it off today, that's in the UK and Ireland. So it is a team, and candidly, they found, while they have some unique differences across the pond, they have a lot of things that were similar. And so they are first now international hub, but those hubs connect throughout their community. And it can be STEM sessions, it can be clothing drives, it can be resume prep, it can be at the holiday. Sometimes it is, they adopt families. So Medtronic creates this kind of 360 experience. So there's not just you're creating devices, but you are also building networks in where you work, and you're building networks within your community.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate that feedback. I see a question in the chat around any, I guess, groundbreaking experiences for that showcases Medtronic commitment to inclusion and diversity. And I know you were talking about our ERGs and our ADNs. One of the things I wanted to add, and hopefully this kind of addresses that chat question a little bit, is one of the things that was unique for me in my time at Medtronic is that Medtronic has Black engineers at Medtronic, right? And so a lot of our ERGs, especially for ADNs, is across the functional area. And so one of the things that was unique for me was being able to have a group of engineers who understands the nuances of being Black and being engineering, and also having a place to go to get technical feedback and to shoot around technical ideas internally and be able to get feedback on some of the work that you're doing. That is something that made me feel included here at Medtronic, because I hadn't had that experience at any other corporations. I have worked for other like larger corporations as well. And so that's unique. On top of having the ERG just for the overall ADN African Descent Network, you can also focus on the technical skill set or technical competency area. So that was unique for me. Does anyone else have any, I guess, groundbreaking or unique experiences that showcases Medtronic's ability to commit to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I think I'd like to share one really quickly. I think over the last, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit more later, I think in a question, but we've seen a lot of commitment to different investments over the last year. One thing I think that's really impressive, a lot of companies do this, but I really like the attention that Medtronic puts into publicizing and providing transparency to their diversity and inclusion. So every year there's a diversity and inclusion report, and in that report details not only some of the different metrics and we're employer rated or other things, but also I think some of the shortcomings and work in progress. I like the transparency, saying, hey, we've committed X amount of dollars to this initiative, but we're going to push and we're going to keep pushing the limit, right? We're not going to just say we hit our goal, but you know what? No, we're going to make a new goal. We're going to set another goal, because we hear from our employees there's still work to go. We hear from employees they may not still feel included, and that means we're not necessarily doing enough. And I like that commitment, because I think in this space, we often find that it's a checkbox. Our leaders to say, okay, got our Black person, got this goal done. But I don't feel that here necessarily. I feel that there are truly leaders and allies that are committed to change. And, we see that not only in actions, but in dollars and in attitudes as well. So more than one specific initiative, but I think that that's truly groundbreaking. I think having, I'll say it makes a company stand out for sure.
Thank you, Casey. So I know a lot of you are on this call today because you're interested in working for Medtronic. And we are lucky enough to have a engineering manager, our senior engineering manager here, who actually hires on behalf of Medtronic. So Trent, quick question for you. What are some of the things you look for in a successful candidate, and what impresses you the most?
Great question. For me, it's the table stakes are, of course, technical ability, right? But we work in a company that relies heavily on teamwork. I think about my own life. And, when I was younger, I thought everything I did on my own was like a superhero, right? But as you go through your life, you learn that there's few things in life that you've accomplished where you haven't had someone else help you achieve it, right? And so So it is with us in product development. As engineers here at Medtronic, you don't want to have just mechanical engineers or electrical engineers. You'll have marketing at the table, manufacturing at the table, quality, all these different functions that help bring about a better product to the market, right? So besides the technical ability, right, there's three other factors that I really weigh in on. Your ability to work in that space of a team, right? And so it starts with emotional intelligence, right? What you do impacts the rest of the team, and how you keep your emotions in check when the team doesn't do things as you may want them to do, right? That's one factor. The second one would be IQ, right? Your ability to go into a situation, assess your environment or the problem, and then establish a path forward, right? Can you problem solve? That's the second one. And then the last one would be what I call a decency factor. And we talk about the 6 tenets, and the fifth one stands out to me where it talks about recognizing the personal worth of all employees, right? Are you decent enough to value and respect everyone that you work with on the team, to elevate them to be their best within the team, and hold them accountable for their work even, right? And so it's that trifecta of talent and traits that I look for and really impresses me the most when I'm in an interview situation. So always be cognizant of that. I know we like to go in and talk about it, GPA and just kind of verbatim robotically go through the resume. If you can come off that and show how you can contribute to a team or enhance a team, which is what we need to win, then that is definitely a leg up on the competition, if you will.
Thank you, Trent. So yeah, so that's really great information. We all know the majority of the people on this call at least are NSBE members. And we know that NSBE gives us a lot of opportunity to enhance our technical competencies through research and projects, as well as to get some of that experience of developing those soft skills by working in teams and getting leadership opportunities. So with that said, Casey, can you tell us about your experience being a part of NSBE? In addition, what interested you in being in the medical device industry? And what advice would you give to students preparing to start their career in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little bit more background about myself. So I am a Region 2 member. I think we kind of breezed past some NSBE connections earlier. So longtime member of Region 2, I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh. Currently, technically Region 4, but I will always be too hype. I'm not going to let that die from me. And I've been involved in NSBE through both the chapter level and then also took on leadership roles throughout the organization as well. I think overall, there's two sides. Obviously, I think a lot of people know the benefits, but it's worth, iterating. From the chapter level as a member, you're just exposed to so much potential and inspiration. I think everyone kind of remembers their first time walking into a NSBE conference, just seeing so many Black people in suits and engineering and, having great conversations. That's so inspiring. And then through that, you start building a network. You get to start, I know for a lot of people like myself, I didn't really know beyond my major kind of what was out there. And so NSBE helped me build that network and understanding. And the NSBE leadership, I think, really gives you a lot of the soft skills and a lot of aptitude for strategic thinking that I don't think you really get until you start working. So having the ability to say, I've project managed something, I've seen a budget, I've managed a budget, I've talked to and did mock interviews or did whatever I needed to do, that really stands out, especially for, I think, anyone coming in for their first career, or even if you have a later career. I think, a later career change, showing that you took these leadership initiatives outside of your daily job, particularly where you might have been an individual contributor. This really stands out because Medtronic, for sure, really values personal leadership and having a real good sense of self as to, what your leadership qualities are. I will say, I want to, kind of tackle some of the questions. One way I'll tackle some of the questions, I know someone had asked about, how to make yourself stand out. Maybe you're already early career and you're looking to, advance in your career, or maybe you've started at somewhere else and you're looking to come into Medtronic at a more advanced level. I think that, what NSBE taught me is to take on challenges. I think when you are an NSBE leader, you're usually tasked with something you're not traditionally trained to do. I myself was very involved in PCI. I know a lot of other folks, they're involved in whether it's retention strategies or just managing a chapter budget. And don't diminish these opportunities. I think really highlight them and ask yourself, what did you learn? set metrics and set goals, and being able to demonstrate that you can execute yourself, set challenging goals, execute to them, and communicate them outward, will benefit you. And I think that, just because it was a side activity doesn't diminish your work. We know that you might put in more than 20, 30 hours a week sometimes for some of these NSBE roles. And so you should definitely take credit for that and, really sing to it. These are all things that I think Medtronic really values and definitely have valued for me, both in starting as early career and as I progress into more, senior roles or more involved roles in my career.
Perfect. Thank you, Casey. So we've shared some tips of what we look for in candidates. We've also gone over how you can utilize NSBE in order to meet some of those requirements or those qualifications. But we also have individuals on this call who may not necessarily be early career, and you're more mid-career individuals. And so we also know for those individuals that career development is extremely important. So with that said, my next question is for Renee. Renee, in order to remove tunnel vision when it comes to career development, what are some lessons learned when navigating a corporate environment and owning your career?
Yes, I think that the last part of that question is paramount. You own your career. I think a lot of times we think of it as we will meet some people and they're going to help me kind of with my career. They're going to help do some things and open some doors, and all of that may be true, but at the end of the day, you own your career. So when I think of things in terms of lessons learned and kind of navigating that corporate environment or navigating different environments, sometimes it's corporate, sometimes it's manufacturing, sometimes it may be regional and you're just in a different area of the country. A couple of things that I learned is I'm like, there are so many people to learn from. I think there is a balance between having that confidence, but also having that humility to say, but these are the things that I can learn. Here is where I can contribute, and here is what I want to learn. Because I think part of it is you never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. I clearly thought, I was an industrial engineer. I clearly thought that I was going to be really on the manufacturing side. And for a long time I was. And it wasn't until I made the switch into healthcare that I started spending time in supply chain and service. There was a period of time when I was an ambassador to Kenya and got to spend some time going over there as we were donating healthcare equipment. And that didn't come because that was specifically part of my role. That actually came from working within the network, and they had this opportunity and kind of raising my hand and asking the questions about it. I think not all your mentors or confidants are going to look like you. And so being able to kind of meet and talk with people has also opened the doors where folks will say, like I always joke and say, I never see myself as a salesperson. So I love the idea of working alongside the sales folks. But here I am, an engineer, a technical person that's now in a commercial space. And I think of engineering as that, I think of it almost as a universal language that you can apply that, whether it is technical, R&D, supply chain, commercial, technical sales. Those are all spaces that engineers can be because that problem solving thread can get pulled through. So, making sure not to be so narrowly focused that you think here's where your space is, but recognize how valuable the skills you have are, such that those skills can go, they will go with you anywhere. And I think the last piece is recognize that you are seen even when you don't know that you are. That means you also have to be cognizant and think about what you want people to see about you. Some other opportunities that have come up were really because I went to someone initially with a question, and I had she was one of our corporate legal, and she goes, no, I know who you are. And she said, so when are we going to sit down and meet? And I was like, immediately, if not sooner. So just recognize that you are being seen, and you have to be open to those opportunities, open to here's what I have and here's what I want to learn. And people will inherently bring to you, candidly, opportunities that give you that chance to do both that learning and that contribution.
Thank you, Renee. I think that was very, very insightful. I know for me personally, in my career as an engineering program manager, I work with engineers across, I guess, the industry, right? Like quality, R&D, reliability. I also work with individuals across the supply chain. And I think that I'm able to do well in that role because when I first started my career, I was open to having an internship in quality, even though I wanted to go into process engineering. And I was open to taking roles in manufacturing, even when I wanted to do R&D. And so just getting those different experiences have developed me in a way in which now I can lead teams of those individuals and be able to at least understand at a high level what it is they're doing and what the impact is on our overall program. So I definitely appreciate that. Yeah, being open-minded and just being open to where your technical skills can take you and not really being focused. So that was very, very good advice. Thank you for that. So taking it back to tonight's theme, the next question is for Casey. Casey, can you tell us about a time when you made good trouble at Medtronic and the impact that you had?
I think for those on the call, they might think I always make good trouble. So one of the things, as I mentioned, I've been at the company now coming up on 4 years. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'm a pretty relatively junior employee. So, I graduated in 2017. I got started kind of my first week at Medtronic. I said, how do I improve the diversity of Black engineers at this company, right? I got connected with different leaders. And, maybe normally like, who's this kid, like raising his voice or whatever. But, I got connected with leaders about this initiative they're talking about called Black Engineers at Medtronic, which we mentioned before. And, kind of over the years, I've actually been hugely involved in a lot of the different initiatives with that program and other programs around Medtronic, advocating for change and making sure that whether it's in my functional group or whether it's at Medtronic at large, we're making sure we're pushing the needle and really ensuring we have the best recruitment and retention strategies, particularly for Black engineering talent. I think that's how I found my way to make good trouble, because that wasn't always necessarily an easy, straightforward path. You definitely have to deal with people who don't have those preconceived conceptions of disparities. Sometimes people may feel it's a personal attack. Sometimes people may maybe not necessarily think it's the biggest issue. And you have to communicate with them, and you have to, it can get emotional. It can get difficult, right? Because as Black people, we know this to be true. We know that we face different disparities and barriers, particularly in engineering fields, regardless of all society. And in making the trouble, I had to overcome those frustrations, and I had to keep a level head and really chart a path forward to whether it's gaining their buy-in or finding a strategy that allowed me to challenge that narrative and maybe make some structural change. I think that can't necessarily spend, we could spend all day on this topic, but I think for someone of my level of experience to simply say, I see a problem and I have a voice is, it reflects incredibly well on me, because I know that people didn't have to listen to me. And people really didn't have to hear my side. I didn't have any authority to make that change, but I think that people were willing to listen and people were willing to learn, really has kind of resounded with me, and really does make me believe I am working for an incredibly powerful organization, an incredibly thoughtful organization, that I continue to hopefully impart change each and every day, even in my technical work as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Casey. So we're running a little bit short on time, but I do have one more question. I'm going to ask this question to Trent so we can provide some more advice for those on the call. So Trent, what advice will you give to individuals to prepare for an interview or transition into a new career?
Sure, I'd say come in being authentic. I think one of the questions was about, being affected or being something that you're not in an interview. That doesn't actually trend favorably for you. I think being authentic, show up who you are. Being different is okay. We embrace and welcome diversity, and it contributes to the overall success of the company, right? So prepare technically as far as, presenting yourself on the resume, studying Medtronic as a whole. But in doing so, just make sure that during the whole delivery, right, that you're being authentic and we get to really see who you are. And as far as transitioning into a career, kind of the same thing. And just understand that, particularly if you're new, there's a lot of learning that goes on. And I know some people come in and they want to have all the answers right away. You may have more questions than answers. That's okay. As you mature, you'll find that you have more answers than questions, right? And that's what truly is to be expected as you go through your career. So don't be frustrated if you go from being an expert to a novice. It's cyclical as you go through your career, and it's bound to happen, right? So don't be frustrated, just keep climbing.
Thank you, Trent. So that concludes the seed questions that we have for the panel. I know there are quite a bit of questions in the Q&A box. So we'll transition to the Q&A portion so I can get some of your questions that you all have presented answered. So one of the questions, well, I guess multiple people have kind of asked this question about software engineering and how does that apply to Medtronic? It looks like there's some questions on soft robotics. But I think I'm going to make the question a little bit more general. And the question I'm going to ask, and anyone can volunteer to take it, is how do you know which business unit or operating unit will be best for my skill sets, and what type of skill sets are useful for Medtronic?
I can try to tackle it. Oh, go ahead, Renee.
I'll jump in a little bit and then take it. I think that because it's going to be general, there's a need for almost every kind of engineer at Medtronic. So let me start there first. Because like I said, engineering, universal language. These are all technical devices. These are not Kirby vacuum cleaners that we're selling. So having that technical background, having that engineering experience is going to be needed everywhere. Now, I think if you do a little bit of digging into the business, between cardiovascular, neuroscience, and med surg, you do a little digging because you'll see that like there's a digital robotics arm in the neurosciences space. And so it gives you some sense of maybe where that's going to, a space where that can apply. So I think that, yeah, there's a little bit of homework in terms of not just Medtronic as a broad company, but getting into those different portfolios will help you understand all the different cardiac devices. Everything now is remote monitoring. So there's a lot of ancillary and support services and software that goes along with these devices. You look in the neuroscience space and you're going to get into things like spine, pain stem, all those different, again, those are technical devices. And now it's also how do we purchased the robotics group. So it's worth doing a little due diligence and homework into the different portfolios to figure out almost kind of which ones almost excite you. And that is, if nothing else, that will help you even as you look for roles. You probably want to be maybe in this portfolio because maybe at least the products look cool and interesting to you.
Thank you, Renee. Trent,
Yep.
Did you have anything additional to add?
Yeah, only thing I would add to that is, skills are transferable, skills are universal, right? It doesn't matter where you take them. I think the question you should ask yourself when it comes to operating unit or business unit is, where do your passions lie, right? And I'll take a second just to kind of relate it to sports. I grew up in Chicago watching the Cubs. They weren't good, right? The team had a desire and a passion to win, but they didn't have the skills, right? Then I moved to New York, right? And they're the Yankees and they had skill and passion and they were champions, right? So I think if you couple the two and you say, yes, I have the skills, but where's my passion, right? Because wherever your passion unites with your skills, I think you're going to be a winner at whatever you do in your career, right? So just keep that in mind. There's a question here, I think came up and said, how do we invest in new hires for training? I can just personally speak, and I think it's across Medtronic, is we invest a lot in our employees to train them. There's an expression I use called growing and going, where you come to the team, you grow, and I expect you're going to go on and be great somewhere else in the company, right? So I think the ability to grow and get training at Medtronic is core to what we do.
Thank you, Trent.
Yep.
So with that said, since we've been talking about a lot of the opportunities that we have at Medtronic and how those skills that can be transferred into our different operating units, I'm going to turn it over to Anita so she can share more with you all about the current engineering opportunities and next steps.
Thanks, Tashima. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our event this evening. And I hope that our panel has gotten you really excited about the amazing opportunities that we have to offer you at Medtronic. And we hope that you see how your background in education would transition well into the many engineering roles that we have available that I'd like to share with you next. So here on this slide, you can see just some of the many locations that we have across the country where you could apply for opportunities. Massachusetts, Colorado, Texas, Florida, California, Connecticut, Tennessee, Minnesota, Arizona. And one of the other things that I wanted to mention that if you do not see the location where you live on that slide, no worries. We also have remote opportunities that are opening up where if you live in areas like Atlanta or North Carolina, you would be able to work remotely in those roles from anywhere within the United States. So at Medtronic, we hire all levels of engineers as well as all types of engineers. And here you can see a highlight of some of the basic qualifications that we look for in an engineering role at Medtronic. So basically for an early career new grad, we're just looking for your degree. We do prefer internships. However, in lieu of an internship, we are completely open to candidates with no experience or a minimum of 6 months to 1.5 of healthcare experience. And for an engineering 2 or intermediate level role, so for example, if you have an advanced degree, like a master's degree, there's no experience necessary. However, those internships would be preferred. And with a bachelor's, we would require a minimum of 2 years of experience in engineering or quality. And for a senior engineering role, we would require a bachelor's with a minimum of 4 years of engineering or quality experience, or a master's or advanced degree with 2 years of experience. And for a principal level engineering role, we would require a bachelor's in engineering with a minimum of 7 years of experience in engineering or quality, or an advanced degree with 5 years of experience. So on this slide, I want to highlight some of the key engineering roles that we hire most at Medtronic. So as a mechanical engineer, you would design products and components for manufacturing, tooling, and reliability. To do this, you would use cutting-edge 3D modeling programs like SolidWorks and Pro-E. And as electrical engineer, you would design, improve, and test components and subsystems, as well as work on product ideation. And for a manufacturing engineer, you would design the manufacturing processes to turn device requirements into life-saving products. And as a software engineer, here you would design and implement the next generation mobile architecture for iOS and Android OS using cross-platform technologies. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, this is just some of the many roles that we recruit for at Medtronic, although inclusive, certainly not limited to, of all the roles that we have at Medtronic. We also have entry-level opportunities in quality as a quality engineer, which is one of the roles that I recruit for, as well as a design assurance engineer, where if you were interested in robotics would be a great fit, as well as we also have other roles that would provide a great segue into engineering, like a quality technician, which would be a great way to break into the industry, as well as a quality system specialist, where you would work more on the quality assurance side, utilizing our quality management systems, as well as an MDR, which stands for Medical Device Reporting Specialist, where you would triage and do complaint handling. There's so many opportunities at Medtronic. Now, I would like to share the next steps on how to apply for some of these great opportunities. So for an opportunity to connect with one of our recruiters, you want to go to jobs.medtronic.com and type in the keyword NSBE and apply to the early career rec or the experienced professionals rec, whichever aligns with your interest. And if you are interested in a specific role, please make sure that you apply by entering in the keyword like quality or quality engineering, or you could enter in the requisition number or job title. And also in the source tracking section, please remember to enter in NSBE so we're able to track you from the event. And you can also take the opportunity to set up job alerts in your profile and enter in the job titles and location that you would like to receive automatic email notifications for whenever a job in your area of interest becomes available. And if you don't have time to write all this down, no worries. We will be sending out this information after the event. Now, we'd like to answer any questions that you might have about the information that we shared with you today. So on that note, I will hand it back to you, Shima.
Thanks, Anita. So we've been answering a lot of the questions from the chat box during the panel presentation. So for this portion, we're going to skip over the Q&A. But for those questions that were not answered, please know that we are going to continue to answer questions after the event, and to look out for our email with responses to some of the key questions that were asked during today's presentation. So with that said, next slide. So we want to thank you all for attending tonight's event. Here on this screen, we have a QR code. Please scan the code and take 2 minutes of your time to give us some feedback as to how tonight's event went. Your feedback is crucial for us to make this event better for the future. Also, for those of you that are attending NSBE, please feel free to join us during the NSBE 47 Career Fair, April 8th through 9th. We are seeking early career and experienced professionals. So if you have any questions regarding our opportunities, feel free to add them to the Q&A box, and we will answer those after the event is over. So again, please see us at NSBE 47 Career Fair, and please take the time to complete the survey that was on the previous slide. Thank you, and with that, I'll turn it over to Arthur Edge for closing remarks.
Thanks so much, Tashima. We really enjoyed the talk, and I felt like a fly on the wall hearing from you and Renee and Trent and Casey and Anita. I hope everyone here enjoyed the questions and just hearing a little bit more about Medtronic, and really take some time to think about, making a career move or starting your career with the organization. You can stay in touch with all of us on social media. Medtronic's handle on many platforms is at Medtronic. And of course, you can stay in touch with NSBE HISIG, and you receive our communications to date. You might recall that this program was one of the options for getting credit in the NSBE HISIG Swag Bag Challenge. So please take screenshots so that you can show proof of participation. And there are some links that we can share in case you need a refresh on some of the challenge opportunities. Well, we look forward to staying in touch. Remember, see us soon at NSBE 47, the beginning of April, and at a future event in partnership with Medtronic or HISIG programs throughout the remainder of the year. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week.